Road to R1, R1 being the Carnegie R1 designation. And I'm sure many of you have heard of it, and maybe also questions, why in the hell do we want to want to get there? Carnegie R1 is probably the most important ranking for any university that does anything with research. And it really gets you into a completely different group of universities that have different support and that support each other. One good example is there is actually a Hispanic serving institution group that only allows R1s, but has the advantage that they're discussing anything from policy, joining forces for funding opportunities, and we're not allowed in that group yet because we're not in R1 yet. So there are a number of opportunities that this would open up to us. One of the myths, though, and misunderstandings that are out there is that R1 is not just research, and what goes into becoming R1 is not just research. It is actually creating a comprehensive university, because it's not just the STEM areas, it's actually humanities, any arts, any of the non-STEM areas are just as important, if not more important, to reaching R1 as well. Speaking to institutions that have reached R1 fairly recently, they will tell you that it improved the quality of the students that they got, the quality of the faculty that they got, and also the increase in their funding opportunities. And that's why we want to do that. We're wanting to do that. So there are 7 criteria that go into R1. One is research expenditures, and that's really the only one that is truly research. Even though we're not controlling research, we're supporting research, and we're supporting expending research. We're not creating research expenditures. So there are 2 that are. One is in research expenditures in STEM. And then there are research expenditures in non-STEM areas. Then there is a category called research staff, which is defined as non-faculty PhD. So if you have a research associate that has a PhD working in your lab or something, and postdocs fall into that category. And then there are 4 categories that are doctorates in various areas. One is STEM, one is social work, one is humanities, and one is other. Our biggest issue recently, and why we were ranked at 185, you had to be 137 last time we were evaluated, was that we didn't have a PhD in the humanities. Now we have since then changed that, and that was due to one of the zip codes not being correct. So we now have a PhD in the humanities, and can actually pursue the R1 category a little bit more realistically. So what have we done since we tried to go on that path to R1, what we call the road to R1? We have given the colleges an overload payment for instructors who are doing research. There are actually quite a few, and an additional title as research associate. So they fall into the category of research staff then. We also implemented some postdoc hiring programs. One is a bridge program, and we just had a few slots for a year-long annual postdoc stipend, again, to increase our research staff. I should mention we do have a predictive tool that comes out of IEA that helps us predicting what these changes and these increases, in this case in research staff, might affect as we're moving forward and as we're implementing these. We also implemented some administrative changes. I mentioned the PhD in humanities, which was really the start of this road to R1. But there are a few others. Dan mentioned briefly the unfunded research effort that actually falls into counting our internal research expenditures, which we have previously not done. So we are now looking and working with the colleges and the provost office to count that research effort. That again falls into the internal research expenditures. We're also making sure that any research expenditure is tagged correctly in the colleges and the departments, which is not trivial, because sometimes you do something that seems to be more educational. And then the question is that research or is it education? And then the other opportunity is counting gifts and endowments and whether or not they have any research component to them. If they do, we could potentially count them as research expenditures as well. And we had several discussions already with Chris Delicia's group on that one. Now we have put almost everything in place that we can, because this fiscal year 23, is the one that is purportedly counting for the next assessment, which is happening end of 2024. So, November 1, for example, will be the date that the research staff will be counted and reported on our end. And then, the research expenditures that we're expending right now in this fiscal year will be the one that is supposed to go into the next assessment. So we can't really do much anymore than what we've already done towards hopefully reaching R1 in the next assessment. So my next concern then is sustaining R1, because, it's one thing to reach R1, and we don't know yet if we're making that or not, but to sustain that will be another issue. So Dan mentioned the need for research faculty hires, and to grow. Everybody around us, all the other universities are growing their research enterprise and all the metrics that are going into R1 also. So if we're being stagnant and not growing with them, we will fall out of that category. And it's not unheard of to fall out of R1. So we do need more hires. The graduate student stipends, and we're working with Bob Stackman on that. Again, not all of this falls under a DOR. Definitely need to be increased. If you may not know that, but our current stipends are not even national average. So our graduate student stipends, just to get students here and then retain students here, we do need to look into that and increase those stipends. I mentioned the postdoc hiring plan, which I'm hoping we can continue. So we're attracting and sustaining a decent number of postdocs here. We're around 50, a little over 50 at the moment.